Respect. Esther Johnson stood at the kitchen sink, her hands submerged in soapy water as she scrubbed last night's dishes. The radio on the windowsill crackled with static before settling on a familiar tune. As the powerful voice of Aretha Franklin filled the small kitchen, Esther found herself swaying to the rhythm, a smile spreading across her face despite her weariness. It was 1967, and life in Detroit was a constant struggle for a 28-year-old black woman trying to make ends meet. Esther worked 2 jobs, as a secretary during the day and a waitress at night, just to keep food on the table for herself and her younger sister, Lily. Their parents had passed away 3 years ago in a car accident, leaving Esther to become both mother and sister to the then 15-year-old Lily. As the song faded out, Esther sighed and glanced at the clock. It was almost time for her to head to the diner for her evening shift. She dried her hands on a warm dish towel and said, "Lily, I'm heading out. Don't forget to finish your homework." Lily appeared in the doorway, her schoolbooks clutched to her chest. "Can't you stay home tonight, Esther? We never get to spend time together anymore." Esther's heart clenched at the disappointment in her sister's voice. "I'm sorry, sweetie. You know I have to work. It's Friday. How about we do something fun tomorrow? Just the 2 of us." Lily's face brightened. "Really? Can we go to the record store?" "Sure thing," Esther promised, grabbing her coat. "Now be good, and don't stay up too late." As Esther walked the few blocks to Mel's diner, her mind wandered to the stack of bills waiting on the kitchen table. The rent was due next week, and they still needed longer. She'd been putting off buying new shoes, even though hers were worn thin, to ensure they had enough for groceries. When she arrived, the diner was bustling, the dinner rush in full swing. Esther tied on her apron and plastered on a smile, pushing her worries to the back of her mind. She had customers to serve. Hours later, as the crowd thinned and the clock ticked closer to closing time, Esther found herself refilling coffee for a man in a sharp suit. He'd been coming in regularly for the past few weeks, always sitting in her section and leaving generous tips. "How are you this evening, Miss Johnson?" he asked, his voice smooth as silk. "I'm well, thank you, Mr. Davis," Esther replied politely. "Can I get you anything else?" He smiled, revealing perfectly straight teeth. "I was hoping to talk to you about something. Do you have a moment?" Esther glanced around the nearly empty diner and nodded, sliding into the booth across from him. "I've been watching you, Esther," Mr. Davis began, his eyes never leaving her face. "You're smart, hard-working, and destined for more than waiting tables. How would you like a job at my company? Better pay, better hours, and a chance to make something of yourself." Esther's heart raced at the prospect. A better job could mean so much, a chance to give Lily the life she deserved, maybe even save for college. But something in Mr. Davis's smile made her uneasy. "That's very kind of you, Mr. Davis," she said carefully. "What kind of work would it be?" His hand reached across the table, covering hers. "Oh, nothing too challenging. Some filing, taking dictation and keeping me company during long nights at the office. I'm sure a girl like you could handle it just fine." Esther's blood ran cold as his meaning became clear. She pulled her hand away, disgust and anger rising in her throat. "I'm not that kind of girl, Mr. Davis," she stood up firmly. "And I'd appreciate it if you didn't come here anymore." His face darkened. "Don't be foolish, Esther. Do you think you'll get a better offer? Know your place, and be grateful for the opportunity." Esther's voice shook, but her resolve was iron. "My place is wherever I choose it to be, Mr. Davis. And it's certainly not with the likes of you. Now please leave." As Mr. Davis stormed out, Esther's manager approached, concern etched on his face. Everything all right, Esther? That guy giving you trouble? She shook her head, not trusting her voice. The manager's frown deepened. Listen, why don't you head home early? I can handle the rest. Grateful for the reprieve, Esther gathered her things and stepped out into the cool night air. As she walked home, her mind raced. How many other women had Mr. Davis propositioned? How many had felt they had no choice but to accept? When she arrived, the house was dark, and Lily was already asleep. Esther sank onto the couch, her body heavy with exhaustion and frustration. She thought of her mother, of how proud and strong she'd always been. Never let anyone make you feel small, she used to say. You deserve respect, baby girl. Don't ever forget that. Esther had remembered. But sometimes, it was hard to remember why it mattered in moments like these. The following day, Esther woke to the smell of burning toast. She rushed to the kitchen, to find Lily frantically fanning smoke away from the toaster. I wanted to make you breakfast, Lily explained sheepishly. To say thanks for working so hard. Esther's heart swelled with love for her sister. Oh, Lily, she said, pulling her into a hug. You don't need to thank me. We're family. We take care of each other. As they salvaged what they could of breakfast, Esther made a decision. Hey, how about we go to that record store a little early? I need to run an errand first. An hour later, they stood outside the imposing brick building that housed the local newspaper. Esther squeezed Lily's hand. Wait here for me, okay? This won't take long. Inside, Esther approached the receptionist with determination. I'd like to speak to someone about placing an ad, she said. The receptionist looked her up and down, taking in her worn clothes and anxious expression. Classified ads are on the second floor, she said dismissively. No, Esther said firmly. I want to speak to someone about a full-page ad. Surprised, the receptionist picked up her phone. A few minutes later, Esther sat across from a balding man named Mr. Thompson, explaining her idea. Let me get this straight, Mr. Thompson said, leaning back in his chair. You want to take out a full-page ad, warning women about sexual harassment in the workplace? Esther nodded. Not just warning them. Empowering them. Letting them know they have the right to be treated respectfully and to demand better. They don't have to put up with men like men who think they can take advantage. Mr. Thompson's eyebrows rose. That's quite a statement, Miss Johnson. It's also quite expensive. Are you sure you can afford this? Esther took a deep breath. I have some savings. It's not much, but this is important. How much would it cost to run the ad for a week? As Mr. Thompson quoted the price, Esther's heart sank. It was more than she'd hoped, but less than she'd feared. It would mean dipping into the money she'd saved for Lily's college fund, but I'll do it, she said firmly. Can you help me design the ad? An hour later, Esther emerged from the newspaper office, her savings significantly depleted, but her spirits soaring. Lily was waiting outside, curiosity written all over her face. What was that all about? She asked as they walked to the record store. Esther smiled. Just doing my part to improve the world, Lily. You'll see. The following week, she was passed in a blur of work and anticipation. Finally, on Sunday morning, Esther rushed out to buy a copy of the paper. There, taking up a full page in the middle section, was her ad. To all the women of Detroit. You deserve respect. At work. At home. Everywhere. Don't let anyone tell you differently. Stand up. Speak out. Support each other. Together we can change the world. At the bottom, in smaller print, If you've experienced harassment or discrimination at work, you're not alone. Call this number for support and resources. Esther had used her entire savings to set up a hotline staffed by volunteers she'd recruited from her church and neighborhood. As word spread about the ad and the hotline, Esther's phone began to ring. Women from all over the city called, some to share their stories, others to offer help. Esther listened, offered advice, and connected women with legal aid when necessary. The response was overwhelming. Women began to organize, sharing their experiences and demanding better workplace treatment. Esther found herself at the center of a movement she hadn't planned, but felt honored to be part of. It was challenging. There were threats and pushback from men who felt threatened by the changing tide. Esther lost her secretarial job when her boss discovered she was behind the ad campaign. But for every setback, there were 2 steps forward. 3 months after the first ad ran, Esther stood on the steps of City Hall, surrounded by a sea of women, and more than a few supportive men. They were there to demand new laws protecting women from workplace harassment and discrimination. As Esther stepped up to the microphone, she caught sight of Lily in the crowd, beaming with pride. She thought of her parents and all the women who had come before her, fighting their battles for respect and dignity. "We are here today," Esther began, her voice strong and clear, "to claim what has always been ours. Our right to work without fear. Our right to walk down the street without harassment. Our right to be treated as human beings, worthy of respect and dignity." The crowd cheered, and Esther felt the power of their collective voice. She knew the road ahead would be long and complex, but looking out at her sisters' faces, in all their diversity and strength, she knew they would succeed. As the rally ended and the crowd began to disperse, a young reporter approached Esther. "Miss Johnson," she said, notebook in hand, "people are calling you the Queen of Oakwood Avenue. How does it feel to be at the forefront of this movement?" Esther laughed, shaking her head. "I'm no queen," she said. "I'm just a woman who decided enough was enough. And I'm not at the forefront, I'm standing shoulder to shoulder with every woman here. We're in this together." As she walked home with Lily arm in arm, Esther felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew she'd face it with strength, dignity, and the unwavering support of her sisters. That night, as Esther tucked Lily into bed, a habit neither of them was quite ready to give up, her sister looked up at her with shining eyes. "You're my hero, you know that," Lily said softly. Esther felt tears prick her eyes. "And you're mine," she whispered, kissing Lily's forehead. "Now get some sleep. We've got a big day tomorrow." As Esther settled into bed, she thought about all that had happened in the past few months. She'd lost a job but gained a purpose. She'd spent her savings but invested in a future where her sister and all women could walk taller, speak louder, and demand the respect they deserved. Just before she drifted off to sleep, Esther smiled to herself. She might not be a queen, but she was something far more powerful, a woman who knew her worth and was ready to change the world.